Hello and welcome to the Bundesliga Show, our tactics review for the week 20. So here I am with Petre. Yeah, and obviously this is a recorded version because when this goes out live, I will be celebrating Valentine's Day. Of course, I've even come in my red turtleneck as well today, just to celebrate it as well, a day in advance. How are you, Petre, over there?
Well, I'm doing well. Another great weekend of Bundesliga football. I do wish you a very, very happy Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thanks a lot. To all of you as well.
To all of our viewers.
Course, yeah.
And for those who are fortunate enough to celebrate Carnival, Mardi Gras, what's that strange old English word back when there were Catholics in England? Shrovetide. Yeah. Yes, indeed. A very happy Shrovetide to all the old English as well. So we have so many things to celebrate this week, including the holidays and some great football to talk about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you were over at Mardi Gras as well. Did you enjoy your celebrations over there this weekend?
No, I'll be down in Louisiana next week, and I'll be celebrating them as well. So yes. There is a Mardi Gras here in St. Louis, but it does not compare to what you get down south in New Orleans. So I'll be there this coming weekend.
Definitely. Okay. So obviously, if you remember that we are in partnership with Bundesliga Boxes, which is the fantastic company which provides football shirts from the Bundesliga and just about every German league as well. They're not only from the Bundesliga, you can get them from just about every league. Maybe a good investment for Valentine's Day as well, while we're talking about that. If you're someone watching and your loved one is a big Bundesliga fan, then it's definitely worth purchasing one of them. The next batch will be out soon. And we're also in partnership with Bulinews as well, which is the fantastic English language Bundesliga website run by Rory and obviously Petre, one of the key writers as well for them. So remember to check them out. Always fantastic, up-to-date news, which is far better than the Bundesliga official site as well, I've got to say. I always get my news from Bulinews, so you should get yours too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that, Mark. That was incredibly kind of you to say.
No problem. It is a fantastic website, I've got to say. Not just because we're in partnership with them, but it is generally a good website. Okay, so obviously we got a lot to talk about, haven't we, Petre? I mean, it's been another, as pretty much every weekend in the Bundesliga is, it's been another brilliant weekend of action in the Bundesliga. Week 20 now, already week 20. We're kind of getting closer and closer to the final stretch really now, aren't we? Obviously only 14 games left of the Bundesliga as of this week. So let's make a start. I mean, for me, the big game of this weekend, it was hands down, it was the RB Leipzig 1, Union Berlin 2 game. I mean, me and Petre both said last week that we didn't consider them to be title challengers simply because there was too long of the season to go. But I mean, if this isn't a statement, I don't know what is, especially after going behind to the Heinrich strike, which perhaps could have been saved a little bit better as well. It kind of hit the goalkeeper's hands, Renov, and went into the top of the net, but that was for 1-0. But that equaliser, what a strike from Yannick Haberer. I mean, he just absolutely catches it perfectly on the volley. The corner comes in, it's not really cleared out, and he just catches it brilliantly from the edge of the area. And then a Robin Knoche penalty as well from what for me was a penalty from Simakon. He kind of goes in with his elbow. But we'll start with that, Petre. I mean, was it a penalty? For me, it's a pretty clear one, this one.
Absolutely, it was a penalty. Simakon was incredibly foolish to lead with his elbow, and the ball bounced off of his bicep. It was a deserved penalty. It was a deserved win for Union. Recall that when you and I were doing the Rückrunde preview, we absolutely said that Union were going to fall off. Yeah. And I've been leading almost every column since the Bundesliga resumed play in January, tempering expectations about Union. But this was the weekend that made me a believer. I don't know about a believer in a title just yet, but I'll reiterate what I said, I think, on the very first podcast that I appeared on here with you. Now I think they are definitely a top four side. What a statement from them. What a match. What a hammer from Haberer. I don't know why no one else has used that language yet. It's so easy. And Henrich's strike was also quite impressive, I have to say. He did that thing where actually, and many Germans make this mistake too, they call them Heinrichs, because that would make more sense, wouldn't it? It's actually Henrichs.
Yeah, it sounds more German than Henrik.
I've made that mistake as well. You just think to yourself, "Oh, Heinrich." No,
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I remember I made that mistake during the Confed Cup in 2017, which he was a part of. But an incredible statement. Really, this Union squad, a great game from Aysel Ayduni, Yannick Habre, Josip Jaranovic was also good. 3 of their new acquisitions, Habre, of course, came in the summer. But you can see that they've upgraded at virtually every position. Another monster match from Rani Kadira, of course. And what about this match would you like to discuss, Mark? Because I could go on all night. What is it to you? What are you curious about with Union?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's also the fact they managed to carve out 1.4 XG to 0.6 as well. I mean, most people, when they see this result, they would have thought it was a smash and grab, as we say in Britain, where basically it's all Leipzig doing the pressing and then Union just get a couple of scrappy goals off corners. But it wasn't like that. I mean, obviously that effort from Becker in the first half, what a save that was as well from the Leipzig standing goalkeeper. I mean, Becker, shoots the ball across the goal, and for me, that's an amazing save. And that probably should have been a goal, really, for 1-1 before they even got the equaliser. But it's just the way that Union are playing. I mean, as you mentioned, Rani Kadira is an amazing player. I just want to know, how are they maximising some of these players? Because, on paper, these players, they're not world beaters. But what Urs Fischer is doing is getting the maximum out of them every single week. And it's just, everyone just thinks, surely there's got to be a time when they drop off, but it's just not looking likely at the moment. And for me, they were the better side in this game, even obviously away from home against Leipzig. But obviously there's one other moment that we've got to touch on as well, and that was Josip Poulsen's disallowed goal on 82 minutes. So obviously Union take the lead after about 72 minutes. And then obviously they're hanging on a little bit after that. And it's actually a knockdown, and Josip Poulsen finds the back of the net. Union players aren't really complaining. They seem to think that it's an equaliser. But then obviously the linesman's flag is up for an offside in the build-up. So what was your take on this one, Peter? Do you think this was the correct decision, and why was this one disallowed?
I'll answer both of your questions. We'll get to how Urs Fischer maximizes his talent in just a second. The refereeing controversy was actually something that has divided opinion across the Bundesrepublik. Daniel Schlager, the match official, ruled that Aysel Ayduni inadvertently gifted the ball to Timo Werner in an offside position during the build-up. So the goal was initially allowed to stand. The VAR team in the Kölner Keller told Daniel Schlager to take another look, and it was Schlager's logic that since Ayduni didn't clear with intention, Werner's offside position was relevant. Now, is this subjective with respect to the rules? Actually, yes. There is Germans being Germans have gone into this. And as it turns out, in terms of the letter of the law, it shouldn't matter if the defender intended to clear the ball or not. So in the current DFB rulebook, the goal was falsely disallowed. Now, you mentioned the XG stats, which means that it was, at the end of the day, a deserved victory for Union. Also, Leipzig did not play a particularly good match in general. They did not put Union away when they had the chance. Some very, very questionable personnel choices from Marco Rose in this one, I have to say. It was almost as if he was trying to mirror Union's tactics too closely by putting Henrichs on the left, which is not his natural side. Of course, he scored, but that had nothing to do with tactics. Using Halstenberg as a mirror wingback to stop the Union strong wingbacks, and having Lucas Klostermann anchor the back three. So there were some weird, and it also seemed like Timo Werner was playing a lot on the right. And as you know, we've discussed, I think in one of our watch-alongs, Werner is more of a left lane striker. So I would say that Rosa deserved to lose the match on the basis of some of his personnel and tactical decisions. I believe that Union were the better side. The question about how Urs Fischer maximizes talents, his talent is that he uses the same system, the same 3-5-2 system. And his only real rotations are the wingbacks and the strikers. Generally speaking, he's got that strong back three with Knoche, Diego Leit, and Danilo Doecki. And Gieselman, Trimmel, Juranovic placing Ryerson, of course. They rotate in and out during the European weeks. Becker and Behrens are the strikers for now, but Sven Michel and Jordan Falk, Jordan Zibachu, whatever you want to call him, performed very, very well off the bench. So he has got this system in place. They're drilled in it. They're trained in it. And he makes the right rotations at the right times where these players are comfortable, of course. And that's why he had the better team. That's why he had the better tactics. But it cannot be emphasized enough that the decision by Daniel Schlager was, in fact, wrong, according to the DFB handbook. So some case for Leipzig to feel hard done by there.
Yeah, that was my initial thoughts as well. I thought they were really hard done by. I agree that Union Berlin deserved to win the game, but yeah, that was a real hard one for Leipzig. And obviously, you've got to question now, does that take them out of the title race as well? Because the table doesn't look that pretty for them. Obviously, they drew away from home against Köln last week, and they're currently 7 points now behind Bayern Munich after closing that gap to just 1 or 2 points a couple of weeks ago, didn't they? And what would you say, Peter? I mean, for me, I would say they are kind of out of the title race on current form. More than the number of points, I would say on current form, they're out of it. But what would you say?
Well, this snapped an 18-game unbeaten run in which Marco Rose received a lot of praise. Something that I mentioned in the column as sort of a prelude to future columns is that I want to start questioning whether or not Marco Rose is that great of a coach. We've seen him have some real problems in his second season with Gladbach, and we wave that off as, well, he's moving to Dortmund, his head is elsewhere. And we saw him not produce all that great of a season with Dortmund and was released, and Edin Terzic replaced him. It's almost sacrilege to consider Marco Rose somebody who, doesn't have everything tactically together. And that's because the team of Marco Rose and René Maric, his assistant coach, who is one of the founding members of Spielverlagerung. Have you ever heard of Spielverlagerung?
No, I've not actually.
That is a great German-run tactical site with excellent analysis and wonderful tactical written pieces. And they even have a little academy where you can, for, I don't know, 30 euros or something like this, have tactical lectures by German journalists and German tactic heads and things like this. Okay, we're crazy. I never said
interesting. I'll check it out.
Yeah, so it's sacrilege to say that the team of Marco Rose and René Maric, sometimes makes mistakes, but I think that's something worth examining as the season progresses, because some really questionable personnel calls from Rose. He didn't really need to have to mirror Union's tactics the way that he did. We shall see. If Leipzig drop off, it's going to be, we'll have some seriously intriguing and interesting questions to ask about Marco Rose coming up.
Yeah, and obviously the Champions League tie against Man City, I think, is next week as well. So that's going to be interesting too, isn't it? Obviously,
Chelsea, or no, I'm sorry, that's
next week, I think.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But obviously, I guess that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, so let's move on from that game to the Sunday games. I mean, two big shocks as well on Sunday. Really, two sides that weren't really tipped to get home wins, ended up getting big wins as well. Obviously, Hertha Berlin smashing Gladbach 4-1 at home. And then obviously in the late kickoff, FC Köln on Carnival Day, well, in Carnival Week, I should say, they schooled Eintracht Frankfurt as well on their own park. So yeah, let's start with the Hertha Gladbach game, because that was the earlier kickoff and perhaps the bigger shock of the two, really, if we're being honest. I mean, Hertha Berlin, they lost every single game since the Rückrunde started. That was 4 straight defeats before this Sunday, but what a way to return this was. And it didn't look like it was coming as well, because Nico Elvedi headed in from a Luca Netz corner. More dreadful Hertha defending, wasn't it? The Olympia Stadium was silent, and it looked like it was going to be another easy win for the away side, really, as a lot of teams seem to take points from the Olympia Stadium quite easily these days, don't they? And then obviously Hoffman as well went round the goalkeeper, and his effort was cleared off the line, even though the offside was given in the end. But I think he was lucky that it was offside, because that would have been a shocking miss, really. And if that had cost him the game, I'm not sure whether Daniel Farke would have been very happy about that one at all. But yeah, then obviously things changed. And for me, the man that really stood out in this game was actually Gigergi in the Hertha Berlin midfield. I mean, what a game he had. I can't profess to know that much about him, at least before this game, but he had a fantastic match in this game, and he actually was influential in Kangam getting them level on the half-hour mark. With, they hadn't done that much before that, but after that point, they were really, really good, Hertha Berlin, and they very much deserved the win. But what have we got to say about the one that eventually won the game, the strike that won it? It was that man Dardai, the famous Pal Dardai's son as well, up from the back. A miscleared corner, and he just kind of absolutely smashes it into the top corner, dips it off the underside of the bar into the back of the net from 35 meters. What an effort that was, Peter.
Well, very happy birthday to Martin Dardai. He did that on his 21st birthday, and it was an incredible strike. I found many things humorous about the Hertha match, but what was perhaps the most humorous is that the broadcast cameras had a lock on Pal Dardai in the stands.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah, I noticed that as well.
And the reasoning behind that was clear. They had a lock on him because they wanted to mention perhaps this man is going to take over as coach. If Sandro Schwarz loses, he's coming back for his third stint. So the cameras caught Pal Dardai and his beau, his lady. I don't know which wife that is, or whether that was Martin Dardai's mother or not. I confess I do not know that. But they focused in on him, and they got a chance to show Pal Dardai applauding his son, his younger son. He has another son who used to play for Hertha as well, when he scored that screamer of a goal. And they just kept locked on Pal Dardai, who was just reveling in this Hertha victory that nobody saw coming. Absolutely nobody. If anyone says that they predicted this result, they're liars. We thought Hertha were an absolute doormat in this division. And the scenes were wonderful. The shots of Pal Dardai were wonderful. Yeah. The fans finally having something to celebrate were great. It was wonderful to see Danny Scherhand come on and score that goal in injury time. Just a great day for Hertha. Sejersi, it's funny. I mean, he was an old Bundesliga player from years back. And when Hertha managed to pick him up during the transfer window, that was the only transfer that this new administrative team was able to get. It was kind of a joke. It reminded one a little bit about, he was an old Hertha player. He also he was in Wolfsburg and Gladbach in the academy and such. But, his transfer, when he was the big January signing, German fans were laughing at this. It kind of reminded one a little bit of when Bayern signed Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting. People were like, oh, come on, And so, but he did a fantastic job running the midfield. He really did. In this new 3-5-2 from Sandro Schwarz, and he was an absolute key player. He got credited with 2 assists. The one on the Dardai goal obviously didn't have much to do with him. That was kind of an aberration. But wow, I mean, I'm not going to say that Hertha are back, because as we've been discussing a lot on this pod, Gladbach are pretty bad. Yeah. And what happened with Gladbach, as you mentioned, everything was going according to plan in the first 15 minutes. They were off to the right start. But the Daniel Farke, his tactics, I'm not quite sure if he ordered a 4-2-3-1 on Sunday, because the shape did not hold. I don't know what the idea was, if Lars Stindl was supposed to be working close to Jonas Hoffmann at the 10, or if Hannes Wolf was supposed to be an outlying inverted winger, or if Joe Scally and Luca Netz were working a split stagger. I couldn't figure it out because the shape couldn't hold. And what you have there is either you have a set of nuanced tactics that the trainer has ordered, or you have a team that's just falling apart discipline-wise. And the biggest problem, as we've talked about multiple times here in the pod, is that this midfield triangle of Kramer, Kone, and Weigl isn't working out. Weigl was suspended. He moved Kramer back to pair with Kone. Hoffmann worked as the 10, which was kind of silly because he's stronger on the wing. Bad tactics, bad execution, kind of a bad team. But we're really great to see Hertha come back like that. Good for Sajaji, great for Dardai, both Dardais. And our friends, our Charlottenburg friends in the capital, they have something to cheer about for once. So good for them. A shock result, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely haven't had a lot to cheer about so far this season at all, have they? Let's be honest. This was the first win, obviously, of the Rückrunde and the first win in general for a long time. But, it gives them a bit of hope because they're actually incredibly out of the bottom two now. So, obviously, they're out of that direct relegated side after Stuttgart's defeat as well. So things are looking a little bit better for them, Obviously, a lot of the lower teams lost as well this weekend. The likes of Bochum lost, which is expected against Bayern, but it was a really good weekend for them, and they managed to make up some ground that had been lost over the last few weeks. But I just wanted to ask you a bit more about Daniel Farke as well, because, obviously, he is a manager that came with relatively high hopes. He'd done well at Norwich in England, although some people in England would say he didn't do as well as what was said because he won 2 promotions from the Championship. But his record in the Premier League was very poor, let's be honest, And I think he finished 20th twice, basically, in the Premier League. So
I think Norwich, there must be some sort of rule that they can't stay in one division for more than
they've got the record of the most relegations, I think. I think they've had 6 or 7 from the Premier League.
Yes, they are the Paderborn
and 2 of them were from, obviously, under Daniel Farke. But obviously, from a German perspective, he came with relatively high hopes. Gladbach, they always seem to have good managers on paper. Obviously, Adi Hütter last season, who didn't work out at all. I was a little bit shocked that they actually fired him in the end because I thought there was some benefit in giving him a second season. But what do you think of Daniel Farke? Do you think he's going to be a long-term manager for the club? Because he actually started well, didn't he? But, things have really fallen off the last 7-8 games, I would say, either side of the break, really.
Well, the problem that you have in Gladbach is that this is kind of a mid-market club that got hit really hard by the pandemic. So they don't have as much money to invest as they once did. Gladbach have been up and down. They were in the Zweite Liga some 12 years ago, I believe. So, of course, their rivalry with Bayern München in the 70s was legendary. But they are a club that's gone up and down. They lost what Germans call the manager in Max Ebel to burnout. And that was in the middle of the Adi Hütter year. When Adi Hütter initially signed with Gladbach, a lot of us were surprised. Many of us were wondering why did he sign with this club? It just seemed like a good fit. The reason, of course, was that Freddy Bobic had left Eintracht Frankfurt, and many things had changed. He wanted to change. A real sliding doors moment for Adi Hütter because he could have been with Eintracht Frankfurt. He could have, in principle, perhaps helped them to the Europa League title. They had the talent in place. Gladbach, in losing Marco Rose, in losing Max Ebel, in sort of imploding over the second half of the season last year under Hütter. And then this past offseason, there was another really big disappointment. Lucien Favre was set to return to Gladbach, which would have been a major coup. It would have been great for the fans. It would have been great for the club in general, but Favre decided that he didn't want to. I think they had an agreement in place to bring him in, and he just decided at the last moment that he didn't want to return to the Bundesliga because he didn't enjoy himself coaching Dortmund, and he wanted to go back to France, which, talk about a sliding doors moment. He's done now too. So Farke was sort of brought in as an afterthought. And there's no question that, he's had some bad luck. Thuram, with his injuries, has not been able to recapture the form of a couple years ago, so he doesn't have the striker that he needs. But he's made a lot of tactical mistakes too. He's made a lot of mistakes in building his midfield. I think that, we talked a lot about how when Ko Itakura got injured, that's when their poor run of form started during the Hinrunde. So that was bad luck as well. But you have to build the defensive unit. So Falk, I mean, it's a mid-market club. They don't have the money to bring in the players. Falk is not really doing well with the hand that he has. And, I initially picked Gladbach to be relegation candidates at the beginning of the season. And I got a lot of flack from Gladbach fans, some of which was deserved because, I was being a little bit overly pessimistic. But I just knew that, or I had a feeling that this club, its best years, it's the years where they got to the Champions League under Rose, that's behind them. They have revenue shortfalls thanks to the pandemic. They have a lot of players leaving on freeze. They have, their longtime manager, Max Eberle, who left, and they've had a string of coaches who just haven't been able to build a footballing thesis. Yeah. So that's what you have going on with Gladbach. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see Daniel Fark leave after one season, just as Adi Hütter did. I mean, it was just something that him and Roland Wirtz came to a mutual consent. We might see that again if results don't pick up for him.
Yeah, and obviously they've dropped out of the top half, I think, for the first time this season as well. They're currently 10th, obviously. So things are definitely going in the wrong direction. They're not going to be involved in the relegation fray. They're still well clear of that. No. But, I mean, it could end up being quite an underwhelming season, really, for Borussia Mönchengladbach. But, yeah, let's move on to the next game. So, yeah, the other Sunday clash between FC Köln and Frankfurt. I mean, I think both me and you, Peter, we both thought that Frankfurt were title challengers, but it's not really gone there. I wouldn't say they've been terrible since the Rückrunde. This was the first defeat, actually. But, I mean, the performances haven't been at the same level as they were for long periods of the Hinrunde. But, I mean, obviously they were schooled in this game, really. I think in the first half they had a few good chances, especially through Lindstrom. He had a few really good runs, but he just couldn't square it back to Muani, unfortunately, in this situation. But, I mean, they looked well into the game until they went behind, really. And it was a brilliant ball from that man, Flo Kind, who put a brilliant ball in for Hubers, who basically couldn't miss, could he? I mean, I think I would have scored that one, to be honest with you.
The old grandmother would have, yeah.
But, it was a brilliant crossing. I mean, he can do that, Flo Kind, can't he? He's absolutely brilliant at drifting those balls in with a really good dip. They come very high and then drop in a really nice angle. And it was a fantastic ball in. That was the catalyst to what ended up being a really, really good win for FC Köln, who are now 5 unbeaten, actually, into the Rückrunde. They've had draws against the likes of Bayern Munich and Leipzig, and now they've got that kind of marquee win over Eintracht Frankfurt as well. So what did you make of this one, Peter?
I don't want to take anything away from Köln, who are together with the fans at home in a packed Rhein-Energiestadion, particularly during carnival time, they are an unstoppable force. So they did a fantastic job. They played a great game. For me, the best player on the Köln side there was Elias Shkiri, who will be departing the club this summer. They're really going to miss him. The Tunisian has just rounded his game perfectly. He's an absolute pressing machine. And he can take a ball off of anybody in midfield, even Jesper Lindstrom and Randall Kolo Muani. And that's saying quite a lot. So, I mean, again, I don't want to take anything away from Köln. A wonderful performance by Shkiri. A great ball in there from Kainz, the Germany U21 international, who we're all very excited to see playing well again. And they just fed off the energy of the crowd and they made it happen. That being said, some very, very poor squad rotation choices from Oliver Glasner, whom I think pretty much anybody who follows German football would agree at this point doesn't rotate often enough. He often sticks with the same system and the same players, even in the packed match weeks. And the mistake that he made here was giving Makoto Hasebe, 39-year-old Makoto Hasebe, 3 starts in a row. And there was no reason for that. I mean, you could have just rotated in Smolcic, to anchor the back 3. Hasebe looked so tired. I felt so bad for him. As a man who is around the same age, look, I can't. I can't run on the pitch like I used to. I'm sorry, but the body has certain limitations, and it was a most unfortunate match for Hasebe. Several defensive errors from him. Jibril Sow, who actually was freshly rotated in, he had an uncommonly bad match. Missed many rotating or marking assignments, I should say. And I think that you could have questioned him bringing Lindstrom in for the start here, because Lindstrom has been kind of iffy as of late. What we saw in the Pokal with Rafael Santos Borre working behind Kolo Muani, not as a striker, but as a buttressing support, actually chained with Mario Götze. Maybe he should have continued to roll with that if he was going to continue to roll with players, because Borre, as we know, is ravenous at this point. I mean, he is so hungry for minutes. He is so hungry for goals. Okay, he's naturally a center forward, but I mean, just put him somewhere on the pitch and some good things will invariably happen. So you can question the squad selections of Glasner in this case, but still an unexpected result. One of two big upsets on Super Sunday. Perhaps we can throw the American Super Bowl in there as well. That was kind of an upset. Two results that nobody was expecting. But we leveled, I think, some legitimate criticism at both Frankfurt and Gladbach for dropping these games in our analysis this week.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree that Borre needs to be getting more minutes because he is still a quality player. I agree that he is by nature a number 9, but he can provide quality in behind the striker as well. So, I mean, obviously, you're not going to remove Kolo Muani. He's like undroppable at this point, basically. So, unless he's like, you bring him on in a wheelchair, to be honest with you, if he was, do you know what I mean? He's that good. The guy's that good. For me, he's probably been the best player in the Bundesliga this season overall. But I think I would go that far for me. But I do agree that Borre needs a few more minutes. And he really, really wants to play. You feel as though he wants to kind of reintegrate himself into this Frankfurt side, but he's just not being given the opportunities. Apart from obviously in the Pokal the other day when he did get a goal as well. And I know it's only against Darmstadt or in the Zweite League, but I mean, they're the top of the Zweite League, so they're not exactly a poor side by their own right. But yeah, I'd like to see him a little bit more. I think Lindstrom, the problem with him is that he's brilliant on the ball. Like his dribbling is outstanding, but at times his final product is still not consistent enough for me. I think he'll be a really, really good player in 2 or 3 years' time once he's kind of refined his game a little bit more, because he's got very, very good natural talent, but at times he's just a bit wasteful for me. That's his only problem. And this was one of his worst games in terms of final product that I've seen in quite a while, to be honest. But anyway, great result for Köln. They'll be happy. They're pretty much safe now as well, let's be honest. They're not going to be in any relegation trouble whatsoever. So, yeah, we'll have to see how they can push on and maybe fight for a top half finish. So, yeah, let's move more on to some of the Saturday games now. So, I think obviously one of the big ones was the Freiburg-Stuttgart game. Because obviously, I mean, Stuttgart were in a very, very rare situation. They're actually winning away from home, which doesn't happen very often, let's be honest. And they were winning for quite a long time as well after Chris Furick's brilliant strike, actually. What a strike that was. He's not everybody's favorite player. I know Rory's not his biggest fan at all, but what a strike this was. He took the ball and just smashed it. There were quite a few really, really good goals this weekend, weren't there? And that was one of them as well. Smashed it top corner, no chance for Flecken, and it was 1-0 to Stuttgart. But then they looked quite comfortable in the first half, I thought. I thought Freiburg looked flat. You know, it is a derby, this game as well, down in Baden-Württemberg. You know, I think maybe 100 kilometers or so separating these two sides. So they're not very close, but
it's kind of a derby. I mean, Freiburg is way down in the southern tip of Baden-Württemberg.
Yeah, it is.
And Stuttgart is the capital of Baden-Württemberg. But most of the people from Bavü, including many members of my family, consider Stuttgart to be, the Württembergers, whereas the rest of the state is either, Baden or, Swabians, as we've discussed. Yeah. I am a big Chris Führich fan. I think that he's an excellent player. He's really been probably one of the only reliable finishers for this team since he arrived from Paderborn a couple of summers ago. I think I also appreciate how Chris Führich in his post-match interview took responsibility for missing the chance at the 2-1, which he did. I believe was it in the 70th or so?
Yeah, it was quite late on. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he's a good player. I think he's a mature player. And I don't want to hear from Bruno Labbadia about VAR ruining football. There were two controversial penalties in this match, both of them involving Dan Axel Zagadou, who started over Kostas Mavropanos in central defense. The reason that was stated by Labbadia was that Mavropanos was simply exhausted and he asked to be taken out of the 11. But in both cases, the penalties were, they were more or less justifiable. And I would say that there were some other questionable decisions from Labbadia in terms of building his tactics. I slammed him for Mavropanos. I didn't know that Mavropanos asked to be taken out of the lineup.
Yeah.
I wrote my column this week, in all fairness. But having this Genki Haraguchi Wataru Endo midfield, I don't see the logic behind it, other than Labbadia just says, "Oh, hey, here's two Japanese players. I'll stick them together." And Wataru Endo is a rover. He needs to be on his solo axis. He needs to have flexibility. He needs to be not back there, a chain, closely working together, axially chained with a bolt lock sweeper like Atakan Karadzoa. So, yeah, and Valdemar Anton at right back. Okay, he can work there, but you have other options. I just did not care for the way Labbadia. I wrote up an article on his post-match interview in which he said, I've never lost by 2 penalties before. I'm constantly getting screwed. VAR is ruining football. I'm an opponent of VAR and all of this stuff. I don't care for that tone when you're in a relegation fight. You got to take some responsibility. And yeah, I don't know. It has some Mourinho shades to it, don't you think?
And you have to remember that he got away with one too. VAR kind of helped him before the penalties as well, because that was like an armpit offside from Grigorovic. That was ridiculously close. Do you know what I mean? That one would normally have been given. If it wasn't for VAR, that would have been 1-1 even before the penalty incident. So it's like give one, take one. And I agree. I agree that they were a little bit soft, and definitely, I think Doan definitely kind of bought one of the penalties for me a little bit. But in some ways, it's clever play. Do you know what I mean? Because nowadays, I'm not going to say it's gamesmanship, but to an extent, you have to do that to help your team. Do you know what I mean? There was a touch. It was clumsy from Zagadou. And, there was enough in it to give a penalty. Some people would say that the VAR makes it look a little bit worse and like there's more contact, but you could see that he clearly did hit his, especially the first one. I think the first one was a definite one for me. The second one, there was a lot less contact for me, and it was a little bit soft, but there was probably enough in it to give a penalty. And as I mentioned before, I think the disallowed goal from Doan previous to that was a little bit harsh as well, because, it was an armpit offside. So you've got to say, for me, there was one 50-50 penalty. One was an 80-20 for me. I think it would be given 4 out of 5 times, the first one for me.
Well, there's something I will say that Labbadia's argument, what he did say was that VAR is supposed to make sure that we don't have egregious errors on the pitch. Yeah. Okay, one thing, what's controversial about this match, at least in the opinion of Labbadia, and I'm sure Stuttgart fans like Rory, is that the VAR team in the famed Bundesliga Kölner Keller, the Köln basement there, they radioed in to the match official and said, "No, you need to take a look at this play that just occurred." Okay, maybe we might see an adjustment of the rules here that, the VAR team will take a look at something and say, "Okay, this is a little subjective, but we're going to let it go." The match official on the pitch has made his ruling. He's made a subjective ruling, but we're not going to radio into him and say, "You should have another look at this." Because that could be problematic. So there's a slight tinge of sympathy for what Labbadia is saying, in that, we don't want to constantly have the match official pestered by the review basement and say, "You need to take another look at this because there's a 20% chance that you got it wrong."
Yeah, I agree that I think too many decisions are reviewed by the Kölner Keller. I think that's the problem. I think for me, VAR is good, but it should only be used for very clear decisions. That's always been my take on it. I think 50-50 decisions are better decided by the referee because, he's there. He can see it in real time, and I think the referees, we've got to give them some respect. And I think one thing that VAR has told us is that the referees were doing a very good job before VAR, actually, for me. And they were getting 95% of decisions correct. But the problem is that the fans were so angry if one decision went against them. That's why we had VAR in the end, ultimately. So I think it's a bit ironic. And also the managers and coaches were also going crazy when one decision went against them. So it's a little bit ironic now that some of those guys are saying we should get rid of it. But it is hard. I understand it. It is hard because, football is such an emotional game and we don't want to see goals disallowed for 1 millimeter offside. So I think it needs to come across all of football because in the Premier League, there were also a lot of big, strange calls this weekend as well on the part of VAR, which actually ended up with huge circumstances in the title race and the relegation race as well. So for me, I think it's got to be something football-wide. I think it's got to be, only very clear decisions. But then what is a very clear decision? I guess that's the problem.
Labadia has registered his complaint. The DFB will take it seriously, and we will find a solution to this. I guess I was with him until he said, "I always get screwed." I don't want to hear that. I don't want to. That's Mourinho speak. I don't want to hear that from any trainer, particularly not one relegation.
And he's not particularly impressed either, Labadia. Let's be honest. Again, as you say, Anton at right back, I just can't see that at all. I mean, he signed Vanuma for €5 million, which is a big transfer fee, and he barely played the whole season. I know he got off to a bad start and he got a red card very early on in his career, but he has to have some quality. Surely he's got to be better than Anton at right back.
Well, if you're having problems, if you're having issues with a dearth of options at center forward, go up the flanks. And Borna Sosa needs a partner who can work with him with some synchronization, maybe some asymmetrical split stagger builds and things like this. I like Valdemar Anton. I think he's done a good job filling in at right back, but I think that was the wrong call tactically. And he should take responsibility for that. Gil Diaz on the wings. Wataru Endo, Genki Haraguchi. Explain to me why this is happening, other than the fact that both players are Japanese. It's not really big.
Well, they are fashionable at the moment, I guess, after the famous 2-1 in the World Cup. But anyway, so let's speed up a little bit and go through the other games faster. So I want to turn our attention to the title race. Now, I would say it's looking more and more after this weekend like it's the 3-man race, obviously with Union Berlin and the next two teams we're going to talk about, which is obviously the evergreen Bayern Munich, who are still top after 20 games, and obviously the on-form Borussia Dortmund as well, who got another impressive away win against the on-form Werder Bremen too. And again, this was another performance. It was a hard game on paper. Werder had put in two really good performances the last two games. The fans are really up for it there at the Weserstadion. The very, very good fan base there from Werder. Complete sellout, as it pretty much always is in that part of the world. But BVB, they managed to get the job done. At one point, it looked like Pavlenka was going to earn a point pretty much single-handedly for Werder Bremen because he made a couple of amazing saves from Royce and I think Aller. Some amazing saves just in the start of the second half. But eventually, it was that man Bino Gittins, the Joker, as they call him. He smashed in the opener. And then the game was obviously made it 2-0 through that man, Julian Brandt, who's starting to look a little bit better, isn't he, on a more consistent basis. How impressive was this, Peter, or was it just a standard win, do you think, for you?
I thought it was a very impressive win. I was, as I was remarking last week, Julian Brandt is an absolute red-hot scorching form. He's in the best form of his life. He's doing things that none of us believed that he could do in the first place, and he scored again here. It's another great win for the Dortmund bench, considering that Bino Gittins came off the bench, and I believe they've had 10 substitutes score now, Dortmund have, which means they are the league leaders in that. kind of a strange season in the Bundesliga that we're talking about Dortmund having the strongest bench. Usually it's Dortmund who has the thinnest squad and the most poorly balanced squad. But finally, injury luck has sort of swung their way a little bit, and they have the strongest bench on there. I think it was an excellent game from everyone in the yellow and black, the Schwarz-Gelben strip. With the exception of Royce was not particularly strong. My boy Gio Reyna didn't have a very good game. He was a surprise starter on the right flank. But everybody else was quite strong. A shame to see Yusufa Moukoko go down with injury. If he'll be out for about 6 weeks, that doesn't really make a difference because they still have Sebastian Haller and Anthony Modeste. But it's a big win for Terzic. It was a big win for the system that he has, the 4-1-4-1 system, in which Emre Can is dropping back and helping Nico Schlotterbeck and Niklas Süle get into better form. Another great match from the returning Julian Ryerson. Dortmund continued to be red hot. They are title contenders. It was not a particularly good match from Werder Bremen, we'll have to say that, in front of their hometown fans. Füllkrug and Dux spurned a lot of really good opportunities, both from open play and on dead balls. But Dortmund have solidified their place as title contenders, I believe, with this result. The system works excellently, and Julian Brandt continues to be the new German football golden boy. Shame we don't have a major international tournament coming up.
But I think one other guy I want to mention as well is Nico Schlotterbeck. Like, for me, he's looked so much better since the break. I mean, I've got to be honest, his first 6 months at BVB were utterly atrocious, really. Like, he was making mistakes left, right, and centre. He just looked so low on confidence. His World Cup was even worse, let's be honest. And by that point, he was getting a lot of stick from the German media. I think some people were even calling him Harry Schlotterbeck, after Harry Maguire. I heard about that one a couple of times, that he was just an overpriced one-season wonder. But, I mean, this last 5 or 6 games, he's proved that he is a quality player again for me. And he looks like a leader now. And I don't know where he's got it from. Maybe it's Edin Terzic just kind of put the confidence into him. But, I mean, he looks a different player, and he's gone from rock bottom to being in a really good place right now. And, he's been one of the main reasons why. And him and Emre Can, as you say, he's been brilliant this last 6 games too.
Yeah, it's Terzic and it's Emre Can. The system, the 4-1-4-1 system, in which Emre Can drops back to help these center backs. Who, let's be honest, Niklas Süle wasn't in the greatest form for either club or country either. But with Can sort of helping them out like a big brother, and if you watch any Dortmund match, just keep an eye on Emre Can. Keep an eye on how he drops back between those center backs and really helps them out defensively. He doesn't have to initiate a lot of attacks because Jude Bellingham exists. But he really has. He's been a big help to them. Yeah.
And just very quickly on Bayern Munich, obviously, I mean, I think pretty much every man and his dog that knows the Bundesliga would have predicted a comfortable win in this game. With all due respect to Bochum, for me, Bochum are a home team. They never managed to replicate the kind of form away. And obviously going away from home to Bayern Munich, I thought they actually did well for the first 30, 35 minutes. I think Bayern didn't have that many chances. I think there was one Choupo-Moting header. But then, obviously, the goal was a real mistake from Yankto, who really didn't have a good game at all.
Poor City.
Yeah, he had an absolute horror show, let's be honest. And he sold a really poor back pass to Riemann, who couldn't quite recover. He actually made a really good save initially from Thomas Müller, but then a little bit of luck, really. The ball fell again for Müller, who was able just to comfortably roll the ball into an empty net, really, in the end. The second time that kind of thing has happened, really, to Bochum in a week, because something similar happened against Dortmund in the Cup as well. But in this case, it was a poor clearance from Riemann, which was actually easily put in by Kahn. This time it was a poor back pass from Janko, which was eventually punished. But to be honest, the second half was just, they could have had 5, 6, 7, 8, to be honest, in that second half. Like, with all due respect to Bochum, it just seemed like they just wanted to get off the pitch by the end, because, I mean, to be honest, 3-0 wasn't anywhere near as bad as it could have been, was it, Peter, really?
It was an interesting game. Actually, when we go live with this is pre-recorded. When we go live, will Bayern be kicking off against PSG? That's the
it will actually.
So that's the match that everybody wants to see. Bochum was not necessarily can't miss viewing. But for tactics heads, it was. And we saw Nagelsmann use the back three in both halves. He made a tactical shift in the second half as well. Cancelo started on the left. Kingsley Coman wasn't in the starting lineup at all. Kimmich was suspended, so Nagelsmann used some interesting language from what he, in order to express what he expected of Leon Goretzka, and that was that he wanted him to be a lazy six, meaning I assume that he wanted him to hang back, help out defensively, sort of work as a semi-sweeper. Goretzka did his job. Goretzka's, he's normally the bull of the Goretzka-Kimmich partnership. So he goes forward. Kimmich takes his range efforts. So Goretzka, he fulfilled that tactical role, and that's one of the reasons why Bayern had trouble getting off the ground, why they had trouble going, and they only took a 1-0 lead into the dressing room. Nagelsmann shifted the tactics a little bit. He put Cancelo back on the right. He brought in Alphonso Davies to serve as the other wingback, and then he moved Serge Gnabry into the 8 position alongside Leroy Sané, who is actually Leroy Sané has found the right head coach in Julian Nagelsmann. Let's move on. So Nagelsmann said he was disappointed after the game, that it wasn't going to be good enough for PSG, and that he wanted it better. He wanted a blowout early. He wanted Bochum closed out. Of course, he was going to say that that's how you motivate your team for the next match by doing that. To all those watching PSG Bayern live, we'll see. I think he's going to go with a 4-2-3-1 against PSG. That's my prediction. And I think that Kimmich and Goretzka will be double sixes, and that Davies and Cancelo will start as fullbacks. That's my prediction. But we'll see. I mean, that was Bayern Bochum. What was it? It was a little tune-up fight, and that's all it was.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and obviously they have the friendship as well between the two clubs, don't they? So there was a lot of that kind of stuff. That's something quite interesting, because I think a lot of English fans, they can't really get the head around that, the whole friendship matches. And obviously my beloved FC Nuremberg, they have a friendship with Schalke, of course. Do you know why that started, Peter? Or...
Of course. It's I don't know. Well, I mean, the same reason. Do they really not have friendship alliances in England?
Not really. It's not such a big thing, at least between clubs in England. Yeah, I think English clubs have friendships with teams in Europe, but not so much inside the country, and certainly not to the same level as in Germany.
Right. Okay. Well, VfL Bochum is a very, very old community athletic society. The Bochum Gymnastics Society, the Turnverein, was initially started in 1848. That's why it's VfL Bochum 1848. And so if you ask people from Bochum, they have the oldest football club in the country. There's some debate about that, because what they did is they founded the gymnastics club in 1848. Yeah. And 1848 is also a big year for Germany historically. That was the year of some of the student revolts, at the Hambacher Schloss. To try and bring democracy to Germany. So these are very, very, very old community athletic societies. And when they would travel in the late 19th century to go to other, they had their rivalries and they had their friendships. And these friendships date back, in some cases, to the turn of the century. In some cases, they're younger, 30, 40 years old or something like this. But it was, I believe, were they commemorating 50 years of Bayern and Bochum on Sunday? And there were some lovely scenes there at the Allianz. But they just decided that, the groups of traveling supporters decided that they liked one another some 50 years ago, and they started to coordinate on projects and things like that. And that's why you have friendship. I can't believe that you don't have that in England.
Yeah. No, it's not a big thing at all. Yeah, as I say, most of the clubs in the same area, they hate each other, basically. So, I mean, I know obviously Bochum and Bayern Munich are at basically the opposite ends of the country in some ways, So, maybe that's part of the reason. But, I can't really think of any kind of major friendships between English clubs. It's certainly not in the same way. Like, for example, the Nuremberg and Schalke one, they both sing the club song as well, Die Legende lebt. Like, they sing it together, which is absolutely fantastic, by the way, to see. I saw it live once, and it's definitely something you've got to see in German football. But I was really surprised, and it made me interested in just how this started, really, this kind of culture. Because I think in England, in English, we have rivalries, but not really friendships.
Well, that's part of what ultra fandom is. Okay, there's hooliganism, but there's also friendships.
Yeah,
it's just the way it is in Germany.
Yeah, but it's another interesting point to the culture. And speaking of culture, actually, obviously the Carnival Club, SFV Mainz, obviously had a really good win as well at home, obviously in their very, very interesting Carnival strip. Before we get into this one, what did you make of that strip? Did you think it was a nice shirt, or a bit questionable, that one from Mainz?
They do it every year, and some people hate it. Some people think it's the ugliest thing that they've ever seen. I always love it, because I love Carnival, and I also like that in the city, not just in the stadium, around the fans will be sporting that tricot. They'll be sporting it all year long. Yeah. And when 11/11 comes, November 11th, when it comes time for all the carnival societies to start planning their carnival, getting their carnival plans together, everybody will be wearing that tricot. It was, wow, Mainz. That's Bo Svensson. I mean, they've just Ajorque. His importance to allowing the two supporting attackers to thrive cannot be understated. Onasiwo, our boy Onasiwo, scored again, but Jae Sung Lee, the South Korean international, 2 goals that he basically created himself with midfield ball dispossessions of Felix Oduokai and Robert Gomni. Wow, what a match from him. Mainzer fans, okay, actually, they're FC Kaiserslauten's rivals, but I enjoy friendly relations with Mainzer fans. So good to them. It was a great win. I think that club might be in the European discussion maybe a little bit later this year.
Yeah.
I think we pretty much covered everything, did we not? With the exception of Hoffenheim, Leverkusen.
Yeah, that's the only one, the final one I wanted to go over. Yeah, so obviously it was the man with 2 surnames, as I call him, Pellegrino Materazzo. It was his first game as Hoffenheim coach, but to be honest, I watched the highlights of this game and I was just thinking it's exactly the same problems as what was happening under Andre Breitenreiter. To be honest with you, like they were creating some chances, but just not putting them away, and very, very casual at the back. Again, I mean, Kabak was poor. I thought Brooks was a little bit better in this game, but they've still got big problems. And Geiger has been dreadful for most of this season, to be honest with you. He's always been a player that I've rated, but he got hauled off very early again in this game. And are they really putting it in, Peter? Are they really trying hard enough for the shirt? Because I'm just not. This squad of players is a good squad. It should be a mid-table at least, or even top 6 or 7. But they're just. I look at them and I just don't think they're putting it in at the moment.
Well, I mean, Materazzo barely changed the tactics at all. He didn't really put his hand in the club in his debut. Yeah. I thought Brooks was garbage again. And I was also really disappointed in Thomas Delaney. I think that these 2 returnees, Delaney and Brooks, they will improve. You have to realize that after they left the Bundesliga, they weren't really playing a lot for their other clubs, as in Spain and Portugal. So they need some more match practice. They'll improve. Materazzo has so many shiny toys to play with, okay? I mean, he's got Kasper Dolberg. He's got Andre Kamaric. He's got Ilas Bebu. He has Christoph Baumgartner. He has Angelino. He has Kasper. Did I mention Kasper Dolberg?
No.
Yeah. I mean, he'll probably improve too. Plus, they've got young talent in Aslani and Bischoff and Tuhumju and all of this stuff. I wish I could say that, like every German fan wishes they could say that Hoffenheim would be in the relegation battle. But what's going to happen is that eventually Materazzo is going to get it together and some of these players are going to improve. What he did against Leverkusen, which Leverkusen with Florian Wirtz in the squad are almost impossible to beat. He just took a mulligan. He just said, you know what, I'm going to let them play in their usual set of tactics and see if they can improve in it. And I'll start to build my team. I'll start to put my hand in it later. So that's what Materazzo did with that. And unfortunately, from a German fan's perspective, they will get better and they will not factor into the relegation race. The Germans would love to see Hoffenheim relegated, but it's not happening.
Yeah. But I'm going to hold you to that, because obviously you've said that every week. I'm not so sure, though. I agree that the squad on paper is, for me, it's a top 6, top 7 squad. They've got so many quality players. Like,